All right, you're probably good to get started, and we'll let people just continue to join as they do.
Okay, perfect. We're rolling.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone to Lunch with the League today, December 13, 2022. I don't know what the weather looks like where you are, but it is a blizzard outside our windows right now. So everyone stay safe and warm out there. I hope most of you are watching this from home instead of watching from the office. But today we're going to do our legislative preview, talk about things you need to know getting ready for the legislative session. And we'll jump right in there. So here's the roadmap. Here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about important upcoming dates. We're going to talk about demystify maybe a little bit what LPC is. We will show you the bill tracking website, talk about how to navigate le.utah.gov, including talking a little bit about fiscal notes, and then finally wrapping up with talking somewhat about communicating with legislators. So we've got a bunch to cover, so we'll get going. So first off, important date. It says important date, should say important dates. There are more than one dates that are important. So 36 days until the legislative session starts. That's just around the corner. Everyone enjoy the holidays, get some time off if you can, and we'll get rolling here with nonstop legislative fun starting on January 17th. Second day of the session is Local Officials Day. That is on January 18th. And when we jump into our website in a couple of minutes here, we'll show you how to register for that if you have not yet done so. But Local Officials Day is the day we bring youth councils up to the Capitol and then down to this year down to the Hyatt downtown, have activities, talk about different legislative things. We're going to do some mock committee hearings this year that the youth councils can participate in, and then have a lunch where we hopefully get your legislators there, as well as some other folks that we're working on. Then starting on that Local Officials Day on January 18th, we will have our first Legislative Policy Committee meeting, LPC, and those generally run on Mondays during the legislative session, with the one exception being February 21st. That's on a Tuesday, with President's Day being a holiday on the 20th. But those run from 12 to 1:30 in hopefully room 210 in the Senate building this year. That's the plan, is to have 210, but as with anything with the legislature, if they decide they need to change our schedule on us, then we'll be flexible and figure that out. But right now, this is the plan, Mondays, starting on the 23rd, but on that Local Officials Day, Wednesday the 18th, we'll have our first LPC. So look for information about those coming up. So what is the Legislative Policy Committee meeting? Legislative Policy, first LPC is Legislative Policy Committee. This is our policy-making body for the League. It provides the general legislative policy guidance to League staff. So who is on the LPC? So every city and town, everyone that's a member, can elect 3 voting members from your mayor, council members, or senior staff. So if you want to have a city attorney, city manager, someone like that on your LPC roster, you can do that. If you have somebody on the board, then board members are already a part of the LPC, and you can then have 3 other people, so a total of 4 for those board member cities. If you're not sure who your members are on the LPC, please reach out to us. You can email myself or Carson or Liam, and if you email me, I will send that to Carson or Liam, and we'll look up who your voting members are if you have questions about that. We do get a question from time to time about if there is a specific process that you need to take to elect those members, and we don't have a specific process. There's not a resolution or anything you have to pass through your council. You can figure that out how you need to, and then let us know. Finally, anyone is welcome to participate in the meetings, and by participate we mean come to the meetings. You can come hear the discussion. Doesn't mean you get to vote if you're not one of those voting members. All right, so LPC meets weekly during the legislative session. Those are the dates that we put up there a couple of slides ago. And this is where we talk about the bills. We talk about bills that are coming up, and then we work with the board of directors and staff to determine what our positions will be. The LPC takes positions on legislation by a 60% consensus vote. Now, if you've attended LPC meetings in the past, You'll note that a lot of the votes we're pretty clear on. We don't need to worry about that 60% too much. But there are times when we have good discussions, and then we have differences of opinion, which is certainly going to happen with this large of a body. And then we do take a vote, and the 60% threshold is what we need to take a position on some legislation. So we, for example, last year took positions on Utah Lake Authority was a big one where we had a lot of discussion about it. We took it on secondary water metering. We talked about different turf bills. There's a lot of things where we have discussions. Now we don't necessarily talk about every single bill, because we will track hundreds of bills during the legislative session, and some of them we have varying levels of I should say caring about, maybe it's the right word. Some we care a lot about, and some we care less about. We're going to take positions on some of them. And so first we want to talk about our foundational principles, and then we'll talk about the bill tracker and how we use that to help inform the positions that we have. So first off, our foundational principles: respect, collaboration, and outcomes. If you've ever been to one of our presentations anywhere, you've probably seen this before. These are our foundational principles. We want to respect, we want legislature to respect our role as local government. We respect their role as making policy. We try to collaborate together and get to the best outcomes. Now, we also have our legislative policy prism that you'll hear us talk about quite often. And we ask these questions about bills. Does the bill respect the traditional role of local government? Is the bill a one-size-fits-all approach, or does it respect that every city is unique? You hear us say a lot that one size fits all. We're going to put that on a plaque when Cam leaves and engrave it somewhere. But will the bill result in an unfunded or unworkable mandate on cities? So as LEAK staff goes through and reviews all of the bills that are out there, we look at this legislative policy prism, and this helps us make initial recommendations as to what we think positions should be on many of the pieces of legislation that are out there. So LEAK staff will go in and we'll take a first crack at some kind of position on a bill, and then we'll take that to the Legislative Policy Committee and either ask for more specific discussion if there's bills that are more controversial, that are more high profile, that we think we may not have an obvious consensus on. And then at the end of the meeting, you'll see us put up on the screen, and then we'll scroll through it really quickly, which is not by design, it's just by timing. But the tracker is out there all the time. We'll put up, here's all of our suggested positions on bills, and then have the Legislative Policy Committee vote to ratify those positions. Or if they would like to suggest we make a change on something, then that would be the time to do that. So with that background, we're going to jump into what our bill tracker actually looks like. And we're going to have Carson take a minute and talk about the bill tracker. And then we'll take a minute and walk through the le.utah.gov website that has all kinds of information. So Carson, kick it to you for bill tracking.
Thanks, Justin. Let me share.
I'll stop my share.
So for those of you online, we have sort of two ways to access our internal bill tracker. And this is bills that we've reviewed and we've marked as significant or worth mentioning for local governments. So I'll share that here. So the first way, which is kind of the easier way, is you could go to either ulct.org/bills, and it'll pull up this page, or you could go through the advocacy link to bill tracking. But this is on our website, so you can find it pretty easily. To access it, we have a legend here with all the different definitions, what different positions mean, how we interpret tracking levels. And then you can click on that. That'll bring you to a kind of a spreadsheet that has all of the bills that we're actively tracking. This still has 2022 bills. Once we have 2023 bills numbered or published, we will have those start populating here as well. So you can scroll through. You'll have the bill number, the bill title, the bill sponsor, the tracking level. We use a system to try to identify, this quantifies maybe the impact or the priority for local governments, not necessarily the position. So you could have a hot bill that we're supportive of, meaning that it's a high priority that we get it passed, versus maybe a monitor bill that we're opposed to. That bill may have some policy or principle violation for local governments, but we don't see it having a big impact. So you can see those positions here. You can also export that to a PDF or an Excel file if you want to annotate it, or if you want to share it with your fellow city people. And this updates every time we update our own bill tracker internally. So we try to keep it pretty up to date. We're in that a lot during the sessions. You can expect that to be relatively consistent. The other way to access our bill tracker, and this is available for league members, we recommend this. It's a little bit of a few steps to set up and maintain, but we invite individuals, city members who will be interacting with the politics side or the legislative side to make an account. So you can access, I don't know, log me out. It's convenient.
So Carson had a quick question in the chat. Does the bill tracker take you to the bill?
So the internal one does. The external one, I don't. Maybe it does still. It didn't used to. That's cool. Yeah, so you can just click on the title and that will take you to the bill. We've had some issues on the formatting there, but they've made some fixes, so we're hoping that'll be working a little bit more smoothly this year. All right, so this is what the internal site looks like. Again, if you're interested in kind of that more intensive legislative experience. So there's a couple different options here. Again, this is populated with all of our data, and all of this links back to the state API and the state website. So this is more details for bills. This is everything. So this isn't bills that we're tracking per se. This is just all bills that the state has published that are imported in. You can also go to tracked bills here and see a summary of those bills we flagged. So this corresponds with that spreadsheet you saw a few minutes ago. But this lets you see a few more details. It's a little bit easier to read at a glance. You can see a breakdown of the categorization we had last year, whether bills passed or failed, and some other metrics. You can also see, and again, this hasn't worked perfectly, but on the committee calendar, if there's a bill that, or if you want to see what's happening on a given day, there's not a lot happening today, just management committees, but during the session, if there were say a natural resources committee, and you could see what bills we were tracking in that committee if you were planning to go, so you could kind of have a sense of what was happening that day. Again, this feature was a little bit buggy last year. We're hoping that some fixes address that, but that remains to be seen. So that's kind of the cool way to see it. You can see bills. This will let you track bills individually. So if there's bills that you're following for your city, you can follow those, and that feeds into our system as well. The other cool thing I'll mention on this, if I go back to tracked bills, is you can actually see our summaries of it. Let's see. So this is pulling most of the information from the state website. This was a bill that appeared in the last week that we had a pretty simple analysis for. You can see, so
I take responsibility for that analysis.
We'll have, on most bills that are actively moving, we'll have a little bit more in-depth analysis here to try to walk through to try to interpret in normal human language what it actually means. You can see different iterations, you can see votes. You can eventually see like how your legislator voted, but you can see tallies. You can see which committees it's gone through or it's scheduled on, which aren't any right now. You can kind of see some process there. So this is kind of cool. Again, probably not a useful tool for most league members, but if you plan to be involved legislatively, let me know and we can get you an account set up. If we have a question here, what's the difference between watch and monitor? That's a really good question. And Justin, feel free to interrupt me. So a monitor bill is typically one that does not have a meaningful impact. So it might be a bill that is maybe loosely violates a principle, but won't substantially impact you or doesn't really affect your budget. Often these are technical changes or cleanup things that like we're keeping an eye on so that we can make it into a kind of a legislative wrap-up document so you know about them at the end of the year. But these are bills that we don't expect you to have to really change how you operate for. Watch bills are lower priority bills than a bill that we're actively engaging on, but watch bills will probably have some impact on you. We're engaging on them to some degree. We're usually monitoring committee progress. A lot of times a bill will start out being a work bill. So we'll actively be engaged on it. We're meeting with the representative, we're working with the committees. And then that bill, once we've addressed our issues, maybe it's been amended, maybe it's just kind of on hold, we'll move that down to a watch or monitor, just to make sure that that there's no mischief, that our amendment's not taken out or something to that effect.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's not a huge distinction between watch and monitor. But sometimes we finished working a bill, the bill's where it's at. We don't expect any changes at this point, so we're still watching it go through the process. But the work has probably been done on it. So most of that's internal. The biggest ones that when it comes down to those levels, if it's either hot or work, that means we're really actively engaged on it. Monitor, I agree, it's on our radar, but we're not planning on doing much with it one way or the other.
Great, I'll drop my email in the chat here if you're interested in getting signed up for this kind of internal platform, we'll again get you set up with that. We probably won't see bills in the new system for maybe another week or two, but we're getting close there. So now's a great time. If you would like to be added to that, we can get there. Are there any other questions on bill tracking before I turn it back over to Justin? Great. I'm not seeing any.
A couple comments I'll just make on the bill tracker. Last year, we did have a lot of people looking at the bill tracker. I was surprised sometimes how many people we'd go into committee and they wouldn't necessarily need to ask what our position was on something. They would already have it up, and a legislator would get up and say, I see the bill is opposed or supported, or the league is neutral on a bill, whatever it was. So it was a useful tool, and last year it did get some good public interactions with it. So we'll continue to work that this year, and it helps with our information out there. The other thing I will say is on the bill tracker, there's a lot of bills that we sort of end up neutral on, or do kind of fall in that watch or monitor category. And some of that just comes down to bandwidth or things that we're working on. So if there's something on the bill tracker and you think, I see that, Justin's put watch on that one, but he's super wrong, he needs to be working that one for whatever reason, please let us know. Because that's the strength of the league is all the expertise we get from everybody else. We don't pretend to be experts on every single one of these. So please reach out to us and let us know if there's a position you think needs to be changed. That doesn't just have to happen during LPC. We can change a position during the week and then take that to the LPC for ratification. So don't ever hesitate to let us know if you think we're off on one of those. All right, Karsten, let me, I'll share my screen. And we will jump over to the legislative website for a minute. If I can get it to pull up the right way. Sorry, let me hide this bar really quick. If it'll let me. What you're not seeing is I can't get the floating bar to go away, so I can get to the website. There we go. All right, so I want to talk about le.utah.gov. So everything that we have on our bill tracker is pulling directly from the legislature's API. We're not populating the bill numbers. We're not populating a lot of that information. We're pulling it from the website. What we are putting in there is our analysis. We're putting in there our positions on bills. But if you want to go straight to the source, where there's a lot of good things, you can go to that's le.utah.gov. The legislature's website, I've got to say, is one of the better websites out there. I know they've won awards because they're a great legislative website. And this is where you can find so much information. So just scrolling down, on any given day, they will have all the committees that are meeting that day. So there are actually committees meeting today, so we can pull it up, and it'd look like this for anything. So Legislative Management Committee. You can click on either this icon here, and that'll give you the agenda just right out of the gate. I'm just going to keep this down here because it keeps messing. You can show the map, or if you click on the committee page, scroll this over, you can see the bills that will be there. So we'll look at the agenda and it can tell us what's going to be on the committee page that day, what's going to be on the agenda. So this is what we're pulling up every day to make sure that we've got everything going on a given day. And then it will have meeting materials. So if you want to see what the most up-to-date version of a bill is, you look at the meeting material list and you can see the bills that are coming out that day. You can see what's been in previous meetings. And then over here, you can also see who the committee members are on that bill, or excuse me, on that committee. So if there's a bill that you care about, you can look over and see if it's one of your legislators, or see if there's a legislator that you have a good relationship with, and you can find out who's on there. So that's just looking at their page. The next thing, going back to the website, is if you just want to look up a bill. So you want to look up HB 242 because you know the bill number. You can put that straight into the search bar, hit enter, and you can go to HB 242. This is the secondary water metering bill. And then this gives us some information right out of the gate. Who's the sponsor and who's the floor sponsor? I know most of you know this, but we'll just say it. The floor sponsor is the legislator who is sponsoring it in the non-originating house. So this is an HB, which means it's a House bill. It originated in the House. Representative Peterson is the sponsor of the bill. But when it went to the Senate, they needed a floor sponsor in the Senate, and that's going to be Senator McKell. So you can see your sponsor is who your floor sponsor is. And then if we click on the bill, well, let me go back first. First thing is you want to click on the lowest bill here. So this is the second substitute. That'll give you the newest version of the bill. If you click on 242, you're going to see a bill that's 2 versions old at this point. So if you can click on the lowest version of the bill, that will most likely give you the newest version. That's not 100% of the time the case, because sometimes the substitute is not accepted. Sometimes that gets rejected, but it's a good rule of thumb to click on that lowest one and check the status over here to give you the most up-to-date one. Now, when you click on the bill, a few different things you can see here. Anytime there's underlined language here, you can see underlined language is new language. So this is what is actually being changed in the bill. Anything that is plain text without an underline or without a strike through is already existing language in the law. So underlined, new language. And there's not a lot in this one, but right here, you see a strike through. If you see a strike through, that means it's currently existing language in the law that is now being removed. So when you're scanning a bill, the things that you're looking for to get through it quickly is what is underlined as new language and what is being struck through as language that's being removed from the bill. And that's going to tell us what the bill is really doing. The other quick thing when you're reading the bill, highlighted provisions, this bill, and this gives you an overview of what the bill is going to be doing. If you don't have time to read through the whole thing, or you just need a quick summary if you're going into a meeting or about to testify in a bill and trying to figure out what it does really quickly, this gives you the highlights. You can go back and see how it was introduced. If it says enrolled, that means that's the final version of the bill. But the other thing I want to jump on here is you can look at the fiscal note for a given bill. So here, this is the information about the fiscal impact of the bill. The Legislative Fiscal Analyst's Office is charged with preparing these. And there's a couple of different sections that I want to point out. First off, you've got the state government section. This shows all the total revenues that it could bring in, and then the expenditures that the state is going to have to make if this legislation passes. And then they'll have an explaining paragraph or more sometimes that walks through what that actually does. So that is, if there's money here, this is money that the state is going to have to appropriate in order to make this bill work. Here's the next part that I want to talk about, the local government. So Molly Wheeler, our policy director, reaches out to many of you to help us write fiscal impact statements or give fiscal impact input on different bills. And that's where this information is going to go. So under the local government section. So to the extent, blah, 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 the local government does this, here's what it could cost. The important thing to note about this section is this will not necessarily make or break a bill the same way the state revenue section would. The state has, well, they don't have to, but they do kind of have to. And let me explain that. A state could pass a bill and not have any funding for it, but then it's going to be almost impossible to implement. So if there's a big expenditure here, the state is most likely going to fund it, or the bill is going to die at the end of the session. If it says it's going to cost local government money, that's information for the legislature. And this should annoy you a little bit. If you feel annoyed, that's okay. It drives me crazy too. But it doesn't mean they have to fund that in order to pass the bill. They could have a fiscal impact in there and have no funding available that could help offset that. So when we put in fiscal impact, that helps us out as we go argue with the legislature or go explain the impact of a bill. But it does not mean that putting that number in there by itself is either going to sink a bill or to save a bill, depending what it says. So the information is good. We need the information from you when we're doing fiscal notes. That helps us a great deal as we're out there advocating on the Hill. But we do get the question, hey, there's this big fiscal impact. How come they're not funding that? And the reason is because they don't have to as match. Same thing for individuals and businesses. This is all informational, whereas the expenditures and revenues here under the state government section will ultimately impact what gets put into the budget. So I flew through a whole lot of things there on the bill. But this is where, again, bill text, fiscal note. The other thing I want to point out is the status. If you look here in the right-hand column where there's a vote, this is going to tell us what happened in a given committee meeting or what happened actually on the floor. So let's walk through secondary water metering and talk about how it proceeded first. So a lot of this just means it got assigned to a committee, and that tells us where it's at when we're trying to find it. So on the 8th, it was considered by a House committee, the Natural Resources Committee, and it passed with a vote of 9-4-1. Then it went to the House, passed the House with a 58-14-3. So every bill has to first originate in a committee, and then it will go to the floor. So if it's a House bill, it goes to the House floor after the House committee. If the Senate bill, it will go to the Senate committee, then the Senate floor. Then it has to go over to the Senate. Once it gets in the Senate, the Rules Committee will assign it to a committee. And so there it went to the Senate Natural Resources Committee, passed there, and then it went through votes on the Senate. It's always important to remember that in the House, they only need to take one vote on the floor for it to pass through, where the Senate, until the last few days of the session, they will vote for it on the second reading calendar and the vote for it on the third reading calendar before it will pass over. And that's without jumping into concurrence and all of that, but goes through a committee on both sides and goes to the floor on both sides. And this is where you can check the status to find out where it's at in the process. This one obviously made it the whole way through the process. So you can see that it was signed by the governor and then put to the lieutenant governor's office for filing at the very end there. Last thing I'll note on a bill page is hearings and debates. If you actually want to go back and listen to the debates, whether it's on the floor or in committee, you can click on that tab, hearings and debates, and actually go back and either read the minutes or listen to the audio. This is something we do fairly often for older bills, or if we miss an argument, just to see what the discussion was. And you can always go back and listen to those and see what was actually said on the floor or in a committee meeting when they had the discussion. So I ran through a whole lot of information there on tracking a bill through the legislative website, but any questions on that one? Okay, and if there are, feel free to put them in the chat. But with that, want to jump back to our slideshow and talk about a little bit about actually talking to legislators. So when you're doing legislative outreach, we want to talk about some things that'll help hopefully make those go better. Now, I'm going to make the disclaimer, and I think everyone knows this. Not all legislators are going to listen. Even if you are the best advocate out there, if you have the best people skills in the world, it does not mean every legislator is going to listen to you all the time. Legislators are going to have a disagreement. Legislators are going to have differences of opinion. Legislators are operating under incomplete information sometimes, and hopefully we can fill that in. But even with doing some of our best practices, it doesn't mean that they're always going to listen to us. That being said, we can do our best, and we can use our best practices to see if we can push the needle a little bit. So here's an overview, but let's talk about them a little bit at a time. So one, be polite and professional. It's important to differentiate whether it's a time to speak truth to power or it's a time to build a bridge for the upcoming session. From time to time, I think we get in the habit of just getting ready to have an argument with the legislature or a legislator out of the gate on any given piece of information or any bill. And in my experience, a lot of times, legislators are more than willing to talk about bills. And I'll let you in on a little secret if you don't know this. Legislators don't always know what's in their bills. Legislators get an idea, they run that to legislative research. And once legislative research gets a hold of an idea and drafts things, the legislator did not write that bill in a lot of cases. It was legislative research. And the legislator may have approved it, but they don't remember every little thing that's in it necessarily. So if you have an issue with a bill, a lot of times you can just go up and say, hey, Senator so-and-so, did you know this about your bill? This would be the impact, or if this happened, it would impact our city in this way, or there's a drafting error and there would be a problem. A lot of those issues they're more than happy to clean up and work through. And if you can do that in a polite, professional manner, that's going to help us in the long run on other issues where they may not be so easy of a cleanup. Number two, be concise. Legislators are part-time legislators. They have day jobs for the most part. They have a lot of things going on, and during the session, they have to hear bill after bill after bill after bill. So it's important to be concise, get to the point and be clear about what it is you're asking for the legislature. This is especially true if you have multiple cities who are meeting with the legislature. If you have I'll pick on my county, if you have a Davis County, conference of mayors with the legislators. If every city says the same thing, one, yes, the legislator gets a message, but two, we probably did not use our time as efficiently as we could. Three, be prepared. Know what it is you're going to say ahead of time, and who from your city is going to say it. If you can get that concise and prepared statement to the legislator, that is going to help. It's going to help them know what it is that you're looking for. And when their attention is pulled in so many different ways, so helpful to know what that is in advance. Now, this is where we can help you. I know a lot of times we'll send something out and say, hey, we need everyone to reach out to the legislator on whatever bill it is, and we'll give you some talking points. If you don't feel like we've given you enough on a bill, if you feel like, if I take this to my legislator that they're not ready to listen, or I'm not sure I can explain it, please reach out to us, and we're happy to help you with that preparation as you go out and talk to people or give you more information about what we need to say there. Be focused and pick your big fish. One of the things that we see is a lot of times people will give a 20-item list to legislators of things that are their priorities. And if everything's a priority, nothing is a priority. So it is always helpful to pick your biggest issues, pick your biggest fish, and focus on those. And finally, be organized. This kind of reiterates some of what we talked to, but have your plan and stick to the plan. And I'm going to contradict myself there in a second by saying we've got to be ready to pivot, but be organized. So remember every interaction with legislators. I talked about this at our conference back a couple of months ago, but legislators have a memory. So if you're polite, concise, prepared, and all of those good things for one issue, they're going to be more likely to listen to you on the next issue. However, if you come in and try to blow them up on any given issue, the likelihood of them listening to you is going to go down. So next, I want to talk a little bit about, and in case anyone was wondering, Argentina did just score a goal. Not that I'm focusing on that. It's just in the background. But talk about some legislative outreach and sample scripts and things that can be useful when you're reaching out to legislators. One, if you get the meeting with them, that's great. Thank you for doing that. That is always helpful. One, recognize the helpful things that they have done. If a legislator passed a bill and it's helpful to your city, please let them know that. Far too often we beat up on the legislature and they deserve it a lot of the time, but they also do things that help us out. And they also make changes to bills when we ask them to. So we want to make sure we're recognizing the helpful things they do. Show them some appreciation. They'll appreciate that. That'll help you get a little further on. Next, demonstrate your willingness to be a partner. A lot of you know this, but I spent 10 years in the elections office in the state. Cities probably have the most bills that they track, but there's about 40 or 50 election bills that get run every year. So we had a lot to track there as well. And a lot of times we found that when we were willing to partner on a bill, or at least say, hey, I don't love your bill, but if you're going to run it, this would be a much better way of doing it. That's going to go a long way of helping them. Now, the trick here is to do it without necessarily supporting it sometimes, but also help them figure out what the issue is. A lot of times legislators are trying to solve a problem. We know sometimes they're looking for problems that don't exist, but a lot of times someone brings something to the legislature, to a legislator. This is the anecdote, and says this thing is happening, in the legislator who wants to be helpful then goes to run a bill. If you can help find out what the problem the legislator is trying to fix, then you can be a partner on that, and that may help us steer legislation to a better solution, or hopefully in some cases get rid of legislation that we don't even need. Also, this is part of what we talk about a lot with sharing data when it comes to housing or when it comes to water use. When the legislature says, we're not building enough houses, then you have the data. You can show them, well, actually, we are building a lot of houses, and this is what that looks like. Or we know that there's a myth out there that our city is nothing but 1 acre lots, but we actually have 55% of our city that is townhomes or multifamily. And so showing that you're a partner on these overall state goals is going to be helpful as well. And briefly share your top priorities or needs. This goes back to what I was saying, pick what your big fish are. Identify 2 or 3 top priorities, and then make sure that the legislature hears that message. If it's a laundry list beyond 2 or 3 top priorities, they're not going to hear a lot of it. It's just going to start going in one ear and out the other. Even if they're taking notes, there's just not going to be time. So I counsel you just pick your top ones and go with those. And if the legislator is receptive to those and wants to find out more, great. But I wouldn't assume that any legislator wants to hear your 20 priorities. Pick your few top ones. If you're presenting with other cities, as I mentioned before, also, if some city says this is my top priority, you say that is also my top priority, and perhaps something else. But when you're trying to be efficient with that time with legislators, I would be careful of everyone saying the same thing over and over and over beyond just a ditto or I agree or yes, that's important and here's a reason in my city. But look at that. And then I would consider your audience as well. If you have a brand new legislator versus a legislator you've been talking to for years, you may need to go into more depth on some of these and help them understand, what are B and C road funds to begin with, because you may have a legislator who doesn't even understand what that looks like. 3, pivot based on your audience. So this goes back to, again, if you're meeting one-on-one with a legislator who has a lot of experience, who's talked to your city a lot of times, you may be able to go into great depth with that one legislator. If you're meeting with 10 legislators who represent an area and 10 cities who represent that same area, you may need to be a little bit more high level or figure out a little bit more there. So don't always have the same message on your audience, or don't always have the same message, but base that a little bit on who your audience is. And finally, give legislators time to share their thoughts. One of the things that we have heard from legislators, and one of the things I've heard from a few city folks is a lot of times we bring the legislators in and we tell them all of our priorities, and we never give them the time to share what it is they're working on. So if you want to effectively have someone listen to you, it's always good to listen to them as well. So I would make sure if you're meeting with your legislators, find out what their priorities are, find out what it is they're working on, and then you can also demonstrate willingness to be a partner on things as well. You can give them advice, you can help them find that out. We know this is not what always happens, but our hope is when legislators have issues because we have these pre-existing relationships, that the legislators will reach out to us to be a resource. One of the things that we would encourage you to do, and we'll work on getting documents out, but give them some of the stats. We as a league have been working on a lot of research. We ask you for a lot of information. If we're asking you for information through a survey or something like that, there's almost always because some legislator has asked us or we're using that. So if we have asked you for information, that's a good clue that that's information that you may want to be sharing with your legislator as to, you know, how many houses you're building, what the timeframes look like, and those kind of things. So please make sure that you're sharing that stuff and being a partner, and then hearing from the legislator what their issue is. Now, again, I do want to reiterate that we know that sounds like a great system and everybody's being polite, and legislators are always not. Sometimes legislators don't listen very well to you, and you know, it would be good for them to do that. But if we can be professional and polite as we're doing our presentations, if we can be cognizant of time, be efficient as to what we're showing, it will go a long way as we have these conversations over the years. So with that, we've talked about how to track bills. We've talked about how to talk to legislators, talked about how to navigate the website. So happy to answer any final questions that you may have, and give you a heads up that we'll share this this Friday and Friday Facts. We'll also pull up the conversation we had early in the year with a couple of legislators about how they would like us to work with them. We talked to Derek Brown, a former legislator, and Karen Peterson, a current legislator, about how to effectively communicate with legislators. And we encourage you to go watch those and look for the best tips and tricks with that. But with that, we're ready to take any additional questions in the chat. And if there are none, we're going to wrap it up pretty quick here. Okay, Carson, any questions that I'm missing?
Not that I see, and you can always, if you have questions that pop up after this, feel free to reach out, and we're happy to answer them. And if you have specific questions about your legislator, what they're working on, or maybe if you have some legislators who we have a difficult relationship with, we're happy to try to brainstorm ideas for navigating that relationship.
Yeah, and the final thing I'll note there is we will be sending out a list this week of the new legislators that have just been elected. So in Friday Facts, look at that list of new legislators. This is a great time to reach out to them, and if you don't already have a relationship, get a relationship going with them. But with that, we'll thank everyone for joining, and you know, wish you all a warm and safe travels today.
All right. Thanks, everyone.